I've never liked taking the last bus of the night. There's something about it, the stillness, the way the empty streets feel almost too quiet, the faint orange glow of the streetlights bleeding into the fog that makes my skin crawl. But that night, I didn't have a choice. I'd stayed late at work, missed the earlier buses, and the thought of walking home alone through the drizzle felt worse. When I stepped inside, the bus felt heavy. The air was damp, carrying the faint scent of rust, wet fabric, and something else I couldn't quite place, something faintly sour, like old water that had been sitting still for years. The dim fluorescent lights flickered once as the door closed behind me, and for a brief second, I had the strange sensation that I'd just stepped into a place I shouldn't be. There were maybe 8 other passengers scattered across the seats, all wearing that same expression of exhaustion that you only see on people who've been awake for far too many hours. No one made eye contact. No one spoke. The only sounds were the low hum of the engine and the occasional hiss of the brakes. I took a seat somewhere near the middle, not too close to the driver, but not all the way in the back either. The rear seats were swallowed by shadow, and for some reason, I didn't want to sit anywhere near them. The bus shuddered and began to move. Outside, the city crawled past. Dark storefronts, shuttered windows, puddles reflecting the dull yellow streetlights. Every few blocks, someone would stand, pull the cord, and step out into the mist. First a young couple, still whispering to each other as they left. Then a man in a suit, briefcase clutched to his chest. Then an old woman who moved so slowly it felt like she might never make it to the door. I didn't notice exactly when the bus emptied out. 1 minute, there had been half a dozen people, and then somehow there were only 3 of us left. The driver, me, and someone sitting all the way in the last row. At first, I thought she must have been there the whole time, but I couldn't remember seeing her when I got on. She was sitting perfectly still, her hands resting neatly on her knees, her posture so stiff it looked unnatural. Her clothes, if you could call them that, were a long, black, tattered dress that hung damp against her frame, as though she'd just climbed out of a river. Her hair was long, too long, spilling forward in a tangled curtain that covered most of her face. I told myself not to stare, not to care. Late-night buses attract all kinds of people. The best thing to do is mind your own business. But there was this pull, a quiet, gnawing urge to see her face. So I glanced back, and I wish I hadn't. Through the strands of hair, I saw her eyes, or what was left of them. They were completely white, cloudy, and unseeing. Yet somehow, I knew she was looking directly at me. My chest tightened. I turned away quickly, staring out the window, pretending to be fascinated by the passing buildings. But even without looking, I could feel it, her gaze burning into the back of my neck. The bus rolled on, slower now, as though the driver was deliberately stretching the journey, and that's when I heard it. A sound, soft at first, a slow drag like bare feet scraping against the rubber floor. Step, drag, step, drag. I didn't have to turn around to know she was getting closer. My fingers gripped the edge of my seat so tightly I could feel my nails pressing into the fabric. I told myself not to look. If I didn't see her, if I just kept staring out the window, maybe, she would pass me by. But the sound kept coming. Step, drag, step, drag. Each scrape seemed to echo louder than the last, even though the engine was still humming. I could almost feel the faint vibrations of her movement through the floor. The smell hit next, that same sour, stagnant water stench I'd noticed earlier, but stronger now, so strong it coated the back of my throat. My stomach twisted and my eyes watered. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned my head just enough to see. She was halfway down the aisle. Her dress left a faint trail of moisture on the floor, darkening the rubber in uneven patches. Her hair clung wetly to her shoulders and cheeks, dripping small, cold beads onto the floor as she moved. And her face, God. The pale, dead white eyes were worse up close, but it wasn't just them. Her mouth was open, too wide, the corners cracked and torn as if she had been trying to smile for far too long. And from somewhere deep in her throat came a low, wet rattling, the sound of air forcing its way through waterlogged lungs. I froze. She froze too. For a moment, we just stared at each other, my breath shallow and uneven, her milky eyes locked on mine. Then she tilted her head, like a dog hearing something in the distance. Slowly, painfully slowly, she began to crouch, lowering herself until her face was level with mine, her long fingers dragging along the metal poles for balance. That's when I noticed something that turned my blood cold. Her feet weren't touching the ground. They hovered an inch above it, toes curled slightly downward, moving with an unnatural glide as if some invisible current was carrying her forward. I lurched back in my seat, my knees pressing against the one in front of me. "Stop the bus!" I shouted, my voice cracking. The driver didn't react, didn't even flinch. I looked forward, and my stomach dropped. The driver's head was slumped to the side, his cap hiding most of his face. His hands still rested on the wheel, but his skin was pale, bloated, and dripping with the same murky water as hers. When I looked back, she was gone. I thought maybe, I'd imagined it, until I felt the cold. It started at my shoulder, a damp, icy weight pressing down. Slowly, painfully slowly, her wet hair slid into view in the corner of my vision. I could feel droplets running down my neck, sinking into my collar. Then, right by my ear, she whispered, her voice gurgling, bubbling with every syllable, "You're the last stop." The lights went out.
Subscribe to Horror Story